Thank you very much and good morning to all of you. I'm just here to set the stage for, I think, a very exciting 2.5 hours that's going to follow. And AI is one much bandied word for all of us. But this is largely a leaders and human resource forum. So I thought I'll preface it with some comments on the future of HR with AI. And then, of course, we'll invite my very, very good friend, NASSCOM Vice Chair, the founder of Fractal Analytics, which is, to my mind, one of the most significant AI companies in the world. And he's going to be here, do his keynote, and of course, we'll do a bit of a fireside chat. And hopefully, if you have a bit of time, take some questions as well. So just as a context, I've been working with HR leaders for the last 35 years, which is my career. And if you think about it, and I come from the IT services industry, and in most companies, let's go back to 2020. Today, it may be changing. But imagine a young woman called Aditi, who's maybe done her engineering in KJ Somaya or Indira or any of the institutes that are here. And she gets recruited like a batch of 50 people, Aditi and 49 others, into my company, Zensar Technologies or TCS or wherever. And she's pretty much a nameless entity for the first 5-6 months. And then she either survives that 5-6 months of anonymity and then starts building her career, or she quits and goes somewhere else, which is unfortunately happening more often than not nowadays, and joins another company and goes through an interview process with all the boring questions like what are your strengths and weaknesses and what do you want to achieve in your career. Nothing she's thought about actually. But she will give the usual answers and maybe make it there. And then again gets lost in anonymity because it's such a large organization and nobody is really taking care of her. And if she's lucky and has a good boss, then she starts succeeding. Now, this is not necessarily true of your organization, but it's true for many, many organizations, which is one of the reasons why we keep him. Mr. Narayan Murthy and I were in a fireside chat just about 3 months ago, and we spoke about this. What is it that is demotivating or not motivating young people to really be charged up in their careers and make it happen? Fast forward to 2030. Now, AI has pervaded the world, and when Aditi joins this company, the first thing she gets is a little bot on her computer and her mobile saying, Aditi, I'm your companion. I'll guide you through this organization. So everything she wants to know is answered by the AI. The AI almost becomes her mentor, her confidant, her boss, and she gets very comfortable because the AI knows everything about the organization. A lot of things that she should know, a lot of things she shouldn't know, everything she goes. And then she does, maybe 3 years later, go for an interview, and the interviewer is also very AI enabled. So instead of asking the same stupid questions of what are your strengths, weaknesses, tell me 5 minutes about your career, the AI has already researched everything about Aditi and has given the interviewer very specific questions to ask. Like, let's understand this about her career. Here are the 14 questions that you should ask. And Aditi feels totally engaged. Oh my God, these people have had the trouble to find out so much about me, I need to join this organization. Then Aditi joins the organization, and sure enough, she has a very advanced bot who's telling her, I'm not just your confidant, I'm your career manager. So I will take care of everything you want to do in your life in this organization. So tell me what you want to become. Do you want to continue as a programmer? Do you want to be in sales? Do you want to be in something else? And she's almost like confessing everything to the person. And the career manager, which is of course an AI bot, will then tell her that, look, if you really want to be here, here are the new skills you must learn. If you want to be something else, here's what you need to unlearn, relearn, reinforce, learn, etc., etc. And let me put you on that path. And by that time, the career manager also knows that Aditi learns better through videos than by watching maybe large script. So most of the learning processes that Aditi gets are based on her learning style. And in that process, not only does her learning become pleasurable, she's quickly advancing up the career ladder. And last but not the least, at some point, the bot will ask her, do you want a mentor in your organization? So she says, yeah, sure, I have a mentor. And in my times, a mentor used to be somebody who was like me, either gray hair or no hair. But today's mentor is 2 years older than Aditi. Somebody who's traversed the same career path maybe 2 years ago and is much more confident and equipped to guide Aditi than any of us have ever been. And you look at this and look at how Aditi's journey over 10 years can become so much superior to the journey that Aditi did in 2020. And all this, ladies and gentlemen, might happen next year, will certainly happen by 2030. So in that context, let me tell you what we are accomplishing today. Why is this happening? Because I'm reading this wonderful book called Power and Prediction, which is actually written by 3 professors from the University of Toronto. It's an absolutely amazing book. Because at the end of the day, if you really look at the power of AI, is because of its ability to predict, nothing else. And if you go back to digital, and I won't get too technical here, and I will request Srikant to talk a little bit about the evolution. But if you look at the evolution of AI, many of us started using business intelligence tools 20 years ago. So BI was the first avatar, if you will, of AI. Fast forward a little bit, and we discovered artificial intelligence and machine learning. So what used to be boring computer reports talking about what happened to materials in the last 3 months suddenly becomes predictive analytics, where you're actually predicting in retail what the young woman would want to buy, predicting in healthcare what could be the problem that the person faces in terms of diseases and symptoms, maybe three years down the line, and predicting what can be done. And the obvious big brother of prediction is obviously prescription. So predictive and prescriptive analytics has what made AI and ML a reality. And finally, if you look at the big changes that AI has done in the last 1 year, is because of one announcement that was made by OpenAI called ChatGPT, which all of you are aware. There are multiple avatars or versions of this today. And most recently in January, while on one hand, President Trump was announcing a $500 billion Stargate program, which involved all the big boys, NVIDIA and OpenAI, etc., quietly somebody from China announces this thing called DeepSeek. And DeepSeek, and I'll use the jargon and request Srikant to demystify it, I mean, it's more of distillation rather than training. It's more of inferences rather than massive large learning models. It's more of 70% accuracy to get the same outcomes for managers as maybe 95% accuracy by putting every bit of data into the large language model was enabling. So ladies and gentlemen, we are at the cusp of history. Even recently, Ashwini Vaishnaw, our Minister for IT, and of course Prime Minister Modi in Paris, talked about India's first large language model. Now, the reality is that there are lots of large language models out there, but India has this unique opportunity to use these inference engines, to use the intelligence that people have garnered over the last 10 years and really make something which works for Indian society, which works for making things happen. As all of you know, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll stop here, that we are really doing well as a nation. Okay, in India, we're very proud of the fact that we are the 5th largest GDP or economy in the world. And sure enough, by 2027, we will overtake France and Japan, Germany and Japan, and become the 3rd largest economy. What concerns many of us who spend a lot of time in academia and in the social sector is that our GDP per capita is still languishing at $2,800 per person. And to take that up to a China level 10,000 and to the developed nation is going to take a lot of time. So if AI, if all of you in this room as responsible leaders and human resource professionals, if we can work together to make that India of our dreams happen, where every Indian, not just a few people, but the entire population at a median level is at least $7,500 per year GDP. If we can make sure that there is an equitable sense in this country, I think we would have made the AI dream come true. So with that, I'm going to stop here. Let me tell you what is going to happen in the next 2.5 hours. We have a lovely panel led by my good friend and senior in college, Ramesh Mirakur, who's going to talk about putting AI to work. And then another colleague of ours from Pune, Raman Nanda, is going to lead you through the future of HR, the future of people, the future of leadership, thanks to AI. But before that, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for my keynote speaker, Srikant Velamakanni.
At the outset, I should acknowledge that Professor Indira Parekh taught me explorations in roles and identity in IMA. I'm class of 97, ma'am. Thank you for teaching me. It was absolutely the most influential course in my life, so thank you for teaching that course. Okay. Now, I'm going to ask you a very simple question, and maybe Ganesh already gave you a hint for the answer. If you ask this question, what's the most important recent AI breakthrough? You might come up with some answers like ChatGPT, DeepSeek, but I'm going to say that it's not that. It's something else. And to explain and illustrate that, I'm going to give you a little bit of a story. Okay? The story starts in around 2010. Before 2010, this gentleman, his name is Geoffrey Hinton. He built neural networks back in the 1970s and 80s, and it was highly unpopular. Nobody believed that neural networks will do anything. So he used to write papers and remove the phrase neural network from that so that they could get published. But then by 2010, people started realizing that AI is making a lot of progress, and Google specifically wanted to buy his services, Geoffrey Hinton's services. Geoffrey Hinton was a professor in Toronto. So the only problem was how to determine the price. Geoffrey had two lowly interns, one called Ilya, another called Alex, and therefore they created a company called DNN Research, and there was a bidding war to figure out what is the right price for this company. It was basically a shell company with just 3 people and no IP or anything. There was Baidu interested in it, Microsoft interested in it, Google interested in it, and a bunch of others. So there was a bidding war, and finally when the price reached 44 million, Geoffrey Hinton decided that he is not going to entertain any further. He announced that he is going to join Google. And the next many years, Google introduced AI features into all of their products, like Google Photos or Translate or Maps and so on. But then Google wasn't satisfied with this progress. So they decided that they have to buy another company. And for that, they had to make a trip to London. Now, Geoffrey Hinton has a problem because Geoffrey Hinton has a back issue. He can't sit anywhere. He has to lie down. So he couldn't fly anywhere. So Jeff Teen, one of the AI researchers at Google, took a medi-evacuation flight up to Toronto, took Geoffrey and went to London to meet this company called DeepMind. Now, DeepMind was not doing anything much except for playing video games using AI. No revenues. They spent a whole day and figured out that they should buy this company. They spent 400 million pounds buying this company. Now, 400 million pounds might look like a small amount now, but in 2014 it was a pretty large amount for a company with 0 revenues. So there's a lot of confusion and a lot of questions asked of Google. Why is Google wasting so much money? So they decided that they should prove the concept. So they took the DeepMind researchers and asked them to work on a simple problem, an important problem that Google has, which is electricity consumption. Google, even back then, used to consume 1% of world's electricity. And data centers consume a lot of 3% of the world's electricity, and increasingly so, going to 15%. So they decided that reducing electricity consumption using AI would be a very good progress. So they asked DeepMind researchers to work on these kinds of Google data centers, and within 12 weeks, they were able to reduce the overall energy consumption by 15% using AI. That was an important breakthrough. But then DeepMind researchers didn't stop there, and here's the punchline. Here's the answer to the question. This is what DeepMind researchers did in 2022. Now, they released the 3-dimensional structures of 200 million proteins known to humankind. Now, the total number of proteins known to the world is about 200 million. So far, before they released these structures, only 190,000 or 1 in 1,000 proteins, we knew the structure. And why is this so important? The structure of a protein is very important because, see those proteins, they fold into, that's a protein, it's a sequence of amino acids. It folds into a certain 3-dimensional shape. If you know the exact 3-dimensional shape, it could be a virus, it could be a drug, you have to build something that matches it like a lock and a key. So knowing that structure is important, but it's very hard because proteins are very small molecules, very tiny. So you need an X-ray crystallography technique to figure that out, and a PhD would spend an entire PhD thesis to figure out the 3-dimensional structure of one protein. So one fine day, Google took, you give it an amino acid sequence, it will give you the 3-dimensional structure with one angstrom error, 1 angstrom to the accuracy of 1 angstrom. So this changed the game, because of which now every major lab in the world uses this technology, AlphaFold 2, to use and understand the 3-dimensional structure and therefore build new drugs, new molecules, and so on. This was not seen unnoticed. In fact, last year, for the first time ever, 2 people won the Nobel Prize, one for physics and one for chemistry. Geoffrey Hinton out there, who you saw early on, he won the Nobel Prize for physics, and Demis Hassabis, founder of DeepMind, won the Nobel Prize for chemistry for this pioneering work. So ladies and gentlemen, what I'd like to tell you is that the age of AI has begun, and it will surpass all of the other revolutions combined that you know of. So it's very, very important that we as HR leaders pay attention to this, because it's going to change the shape and nature of work. Now, first question, how will AI augment human performance? To illustrate this, and we have very short time, so I'm going to give you a simple video and make 3 conclusions based on that. Let's watch this video.
Is the king in residence at the moment?
Yes, it looks like the king is in residence right now. The royal standard flag is flying above Buckingham Palace, which is the signal that the monarch is present. How exciting to be there while the king is home.
Try and tell me exactly what they're doing right now, please.
Right now, the ducks are gently gliding across the water. They're moving in a fairly relaxed manner, not in a hurry. Occasionally, one of them will dip its head under the water, probably looking for food, and then pop back up.
So this is a visually impaired person, but he is using this technology to navigate the world. So we always, when we thought of AI, we always think of AI as fundamentally non-human and too technical, etc. But in some strange ways, AI is making computing more human. And that's one of the things, that it will make our user interfaces much better. That's number one. Number two conclusion is that in every product, service, and process, you will see infusion of intelligence, higher accuracy, higher insight. That's coming from AI. And three is that it's going to significantly impact our productivity. We can get much more done in much less time, which means that the need for people might actually come down. So these are the three profound implications of how AI will augment human performance and human productivity. Now, what if, instead of that, you think of this new idea? What if you think of one AI expert? Now, I'm going to tease this idea a little bit by first showing you this video. Take a look.
Well, it's finally happening. The robots. They're coming.
Hi, Avery.
Maybe that's a good thing.
She said what? She said what? What? I was ready like a full 20 minutes beforehand. What are you talking about?
We are now connected to our plans.
No, stop. It drives better than you do, babe.
It does. Bye, robot.
Now, we've known driverless cars to be somewhat of a distant dream. It's almost there, but it's not yet there. But ladies and gentlemen, it's become very real in the last 1 year. Now, Waymo, whose video you just saw, is driving driverless cars in the US in 5 different cities and is doing about 150,000 rides per week. So far, there have been 0 fatalities, 0 fatalities. And overall, accidents have come down by 73%. So what's the big idea behind these driverless cars? Waymo decided to reframe the problem from a driverless car to an amazing AI driver. So what they've done is to train one driver really, really well, so that now once you have this amazing driver, you can copy-paste this driver onto any other car, and that car will become as smart. So that's what they've done. And just imagine the power of one AI driver. Today, about 150,000 people die every year because of road accidents in India. 35,000 people die because of road accidents in the US. What if an AI can do the driving for us and therefore save these many lives, at least these many lives every year? So that's the power of one AI expert, of one AI driver. But what if you have one AI radiologist? You could have one AI radiologist. So we built something called as Cure.ai. Given that radiologists miss findings all the time, 20% of important findings are missed by a radiologist because they simply don't have the time. So we said, what if you take 20 years to build one radiologist, but then you can copy-paste this radiologist, and now we have a radiologist everywhere. We have insufficient radiologists in the world, and they can take charge of that kind of radiology work. That's a second example, power of one AI expert. 3, think of an AI coach. What if you had an AI coach? So we decided a couple of years ago that we will model Marshall Goldsmith. Some of you will know that Marshall Goldsmith is one of the leading executive coaches in the world. So we took 3 billion words that he's written, and articles and videos and his voice sample and everything, and then created an AI bot, which is marshallgoldsmith.ai. It's free to the world, you can all check it out. And it's already answered about 100,000 questions with 95, 96% satisfaction rate. So I asked Marshall before this conference, can you provide a brief overview of how I can become a better leader in financial service industry? Now, Marshall can speak in 15 languages in Marshall bot. In real life, he can speak only one language, is English. But now, as a bot, he can speak 15 different languages. So specifically, I asked this bot to answer it in Hinglish, Hindi plus English. So for those of you who don't understand Hindi, I apologize, but let's hear the answer.
बिल्कुल फाइनेंशियल सर्विसेज इंडस्ट्री में बेटर लीडर बनने के लिए आपको कुछ खास स्टेप्स फॉलो करने चाहिए। पहला, इंडस्ट्री की डीप अंडरस्टैंडिंग डेवलप कीजिए। फाइनेंशियल सर्विसेज कॉम्प्लेक्स होते हैं तो आपको रेगुलेशंस, प्रोडक्ट्स और मार्केट डायनामिक्स की अच्छी समझ होनी चाहिए। दूसरा, एथिकल लीडरशिप पर फोकस कीजिए। ट्रस्ट और इंटेग्रिटी इस इंडस्ट्री के कोर एलिमेंट्स हैं। आपके
I'm going to spare
डिसीजंस,
but just suffice to say that it does an amazing job of answering any kind of leadership question. I'm coming to my final idea. Just think of what happens when the marginal cost of a product goes to zero. We all remember making cell phone calls with 30 rupees a minute in India, right? We remember using camera rolls and paying for every photo that we take. But then the marginal cost of these products has gone to zero. When you make an incremental video call or a phone call or incremental byte of storage or incremental photograph, the cost is zero. What has that done? Adoption really takes off. And last year, my Google Photos told me that I took 13,000 pictures. I never thought of what it costs because the cost of taking the picture and storing, all marginal cost is zero. So what happens when the marginal cost of intelligence goes to zero? That's really where we are, because the cost of intelligence, when we talk to an AI and get an inference, a recommendation, something, that cost is going to zero. The incremental cost is going to zero. And if you don't believe me, look at the rates. So a couple of years ago, GPT-4 was selling at $36 per million tokens. And today, it's at 44 cents a million token with DeepSeek v3, which tells you that it's dropping by 90% every year. In the next 3-4 years, it'll drop by at least 70% every year. So it'll become absolutely ubiquitous. And all of us will be using AI all the time in every product, service, process, and every aspect of life. Therefore, I'll make 3 quick conclusions. Number 1, that humans that use AI will outperform humans that don't use AI. We already know that. There's no option. We all have to use it. Whether you're an HR professional or a CEO, you must. Second, companies that use AI will outperform companies that don't use AI. And finally, very soon, it will be irresponsible to not consult an AI before any consequential decision. Whether it is finding a boyfriend or girlfriend or getting married, or whether it is about making an M&A transaction, you must consult AI before making a strategic decision. Thank you.
So first of all, thank you very much, Srikant. And just for the audience, let me paraphrase a few of the things that he said by real life examples. I was in the US in October and November, and my daughter, by the way, is what they call a physician scientist in Sloan Kettering Hospital, New York, where her lab and her work is primarily on metastatic cancer. As many of you know, metastatic cancer is the cancer that happens after your first cancer, and almost 80% of deaths today are not because of the first incidence of cancer, which if discovered early can be treated, but is that one cell that lingers in your body even after radiation and chemotherapy, and then wanders into another part of the body and causes metastasis and probably death. So she is working on a protein, and when I watched Srikant's talk on proteins, I discovered, I just want to tell you how important it is. The L1-CAM protein that they are actually working on has been researched to death. But what they're now saying is, how do they alter the habit of L1-CAM protein that it can mutate the sound of that one cancerous cell, and it will not receive a response from other parts of the body and will not be able to travel. And that's one protein. So can you imagine the kind of work that protein research is doing for how it will completely transform the world? Example 2, a friend of mine called me when I was in New York and said, and he's a very young guy, in fact, actually, Ramananda, whom you'll hear today, his son. So his son actually called me and said, Uncle, I'd like to take you to the new Babs Swaminarayan temple, which is in New Jersey, and I also want to consult you on my career. So I said, sure, but how much time will all this take? He says, 2 hours, we'll drive down to the temple and back, and in the meantime, I'll consult you on my career. So I thought, like in India, that he will come with a chauffeur and he will sit in the back with me and talk. He came driving his car and picked me up at the station. And I said, but how is this going to work? He said, don't worry. This is a complete AI-driven new Tesla model. And he just sat in the front seat, of course, with me and put it on auto driver. And 2.25 hours drive through fairly heavy traffic, small towns in New Jersey, he never touched the wheel. On the way back, interestingly, AI said that, look, we're getting into a very big traffic situation, so do you mind taking over the wheel for about 10 minutes? So he took over the wheel, but the rest of it drove by itself. And exactly what he said, Srikant. I mean, if Waymo is already talking about this, a day will come when we won't worry and curse Bangalore traffic anymore, because the horrendous traffic will be navigated by your AI, and you can continue to work, chat, do whatever you want. Last one, and I want to ask Srikant this question. I had the good fortune to be in a very small discussion with Yuval Noah Harari, and I'm saying small because it was 500 people in New York. And Yuval Noah Harari, I'm sure any of you in HR will know, wrote that amazing book, Sapiens, wrote my most favorite book in the world before I read Indira's book, which is Homo Deus, which is really how we will evolve as humans, which you must read if you haven't read. And the third book is Nexus, and this was a discussion around Nexus. And Harari came up with, of course, all his horror predictions. I mean, he talked about, I won't get into this, but it's a very interesting thing on how one social media app could manipulate the entire popular opinion against the Rohingya community in Myanmar. And all the massacres that happened because of one cleric whose voice was propagated, and all the voices of reason were kind of suppressed, and what that could do to society, and so on and so forth. There are multiple examples. So we were talking to Harari, and he was saying that, look, one thing you guys have to be afraid of is how AI can actually, through its predictive power, make dictators more dictatorial. So we asked him, what does that mean? He said, imagine Lenin, for instance, who was seen as one of the great dictators of the past. If he had AI, and Lenin was notorious for saying that if anybody anywhere in Russia at that time raised his voice against Lenin, the person would be assassinated next week. But when voices were heard across a large country like that, and it went to the Kremlin, and there were lots of files, and people forgot to look at the files, so people got away for years without being assassinated. But he was saying that imagine if you had AI, not only will the person who makes a divisive noise be identified immediately and assassinated, even children who are about to be born, AI would predict that will this child grow up to be a dissenter or a supporter, and you could kill them in their womb. Now, this is horrific. Okay, so this is classic extremism by this thing. So I want to ask you the first question, Srikant. Tell us a little bit about the negativism of AI. You painted this lovely picture of without AI you cannot take decisions. What could happen that everybody in this audience must be concerned about?
There are some big existential risks like AI safety, which is an AI taking over and world ending. These are scenarios that many of the big AI proponents talk about AI safety. But let's get to that in a little bit, because that's putting the cart before the horse. It's important, but what is real today is the bias when you use AI to make decisions and the AI is not good enough. Because it's not been trained on the right data. It is not accurate enough. It's not fair. It's not representative. It's not transparent. What could happen is that we've seen in the US several situations like where people have the decision on whether somebody can be on parole or not is made by an AI. And if that unfairly targets a certain community, that could be very dangerous because the way these models have been built. So the AI models not being good enough and not being responsible enough is the immediate danger. That's number one. Number two is that it's a very powerful weapon. AI is a very powerful weapon, and anybody can use it to control. Never before, like Yuval keeps saying, never before have we had a situation where such mass surveillance can be conducted. Earlier, dictators had the intention, but they didn't have the tools. Today, if you have the intention, you have all the tools, because frankly, all of us are roaming around with a smartphone. It can easily be turned around to be a surveillance tool. It already is in some ways. Just to give you an example of that, you know how Meta or Facebook bought this company called Instagram and then WhatsApp, because they had bought a company, an Israeli company before that. And this Israeli company had an amazing way to figure out which apps are getting popular. They had this spyware in every smartphone, and because of which they could figure out what's being used. So because of that, Mark Zuckerberg figured out that WhatsApp and Instagram are taking off like a rocket. So even before their price went up, he proactively went and bought them, and therefore Meta is today such a successful company because of the two main acquisitions he made, and that was because of the spyware. But every phone today is potentially a place for spyware, so they can control and therefore they can act on you. So any country, or any major leader can use it to turn it against his or her own people. So that's the other danger. And then the AI safety is about, there are two kinds of AI safety. One is that you have the right intention, but you misprogrammed the device. For example, you say, I want to reduce carbon emissions. It's a pretty noble objective. But then you give an AI this task of reducing carbon emissions, and in the process it figured out that, okay, these human beings, pesky human beings, they're causing a lot of carbon emissions, let's kill all of them in order to meet your objective. So objective may be noble, but if you haven't figured out the sub-objectives, then you could have a catastrophic situation where the AI could do more damage than good. And then last one is, what if AI becomes super intelligent? So far, in the history of the world, we have no creature that's been more intelligent than the other creature has been able, this lower form of intelligence has never been able to control the higher form of intelligence, never ever. So if we create a higher form of intelligence called AI, there's no guarantee that we will be able to control it for too long. And what happens in a world where AI is out of control? We don't know. So these are all the...
So Srikant has the exact point. I mean, if you look at AI evolving to AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, and eventually to ASI, which is artificial superintelligence. So are there restrictions that governments can do? We are all, I mean, Europe is already talking about massively legislating AI. India is a bit, and of course with Trump in the US, they're saying just let AI wander free. And India will probably land somewhere in between. So is there a golden mean to say that, look, to avoid AI bias, as you said earlier, and to avoid AI becoming super intelligent and controlling us, is there legislation that can be done, or is it more of self-control by human beings, or what do you think?
It's a very tricky question, because today any legislation is going to throttle innovation. Europe is actually already behind. The Paris AI summit was in some ways Europe waking up and saying, oh, I have been left behind for all these years and I've got to show something for it. But in general, after GDPR and after all the various initiatives in Europe, AI Act and so on, it's had a chilling effect on innovation, overall innovation investments in Europe. So it is dangerous. And specifically, if you think of India, I don't think there's any point we are lagging at this point of time. There's no point in trying to throttle something that doesn't even exist. We want a very strong voice in the AI community. India thinks it deserves it because we have 1.4 billion population, but then there's no respect without the strength, right? If you don't have the capability to build great AI, nobody's going to respect you no matter what your population is. So I think first India has to demonstrate that it can build credible AI before asking it to be respected.
So is that a question of, and I mean, you run Fractal, so nobody better than you. And we see a lot of chatter in various groups saying, oh yeah, India must be leaders in AI, etc., etc., etc. And as you rightly said, and not as cynically as I'm saying it, there's too much of talk and very little of action. So is there a concerted effort that an industry association or a group of people can do to make sure that we are not just waiting for government to do AI, but there is a strong public-private partnership for AI?
I have had a proposal for the last 2 years. Unfortunately, no one has paid attention. It's okay. But I'll share with it nonetheless. My proposal has been that we find out maybe get 10 or 15 like-minded companies. It could be the TCS, Infosys stature of companies, and it could be other AI companies, maybe like Fractal, etc. And we could get maybe 15 of them, and each of them can commit $15, $20 million of investment. So that is a $300 million kitty right there. And if the government can then match it, let's say 2:1 or 3:1, we have $1 billion of fund. And once we have that, we create a name, we create an entity, India AI Incorporated, whatever it is, right? And then we go after all the AI researchers in the world, especially of the Indian diaspora, and invite them to come and contribute to it. We don't need thousands of them. We need maybe 50 of them at most, right? 50 is also a pretty large number. And then we will have, within a year, we will have a very credible AI coming out of India. It's entirely possible. And I think we will attract some of the greatest talent in the world. Now, this idea, I first proposed in 2023, but I think it's getting some reception right now in various corners.
You don't think we need a 3.6 trillion valuation NVIDIA or a $300 billion OpenAI for us to succeed?
No, DeepSeek has shown that, what has DeepSeek shown? And number one, that the AI race is still getting started. Anybody who thinks that they have a monopoly on the AI progress is wrong. We are just getting started. There's a lot to play for. So if we start today, we still can catch up and actually accelerate. So it's possible. Number two, DeepSeek has shown that you don't need that much capital. They spent, it's the 5.6 million that they've spent on the final training run. It's not indicative of the total spends, But let's say it's still in the hundreds of millions of dollars. It's not in hundreds of billions or tens of billions of dollars. So it's something that's well within India's purview to put together and actually go after AI.
So just to come back to the original topic of leadership and what is in it for each one of you, we just launched a company on the Bombay Stock Exchange, which is called GTT Data Solutions. And the primary focus is what we call dual intelligence. So our belief is that, look, at the end of the day, and I think Srikant alluded to that, and I'm going to ask Srikant about this, that AI will keep evolving, and it'll be stupid of us to throttle the growth of AI. But at the same time, all of us, and I hope the World HRD Conference will give you some inklings of that, each one of us, whether we are in HR, whether we are a corporate executive, a consultant, or a CEO of a company or academic institutions, I think we will have to do our bit to make sure that people keep learning. Because this whole thematic of IIT, IIM, and then I will live happily ever after for the rest of my life is not going to happen. And I think Yuval Noah Harari said it in Homo Deus, where he said every 15 years, what you know will be obsolete, and you've got to keep relearning. So dual intelligence will happen when we sharpen human intelligence on an ongoing basis. That I hope, Tarita, for the next 50 years while you contribute, you will keep sharpening your intelligence. Because, I mean, what she has done is amazing, but what she can do is even more. And if she harnesses the power of AI and multiple stuff, that dual intelligence will make Indira University the best university on the planet. And I'm just taking one example. So I think that is, you haven't got there yet, okay? I'm just saying you could, okay? In advance, I know. But I'm saying that is something that we need to think about, saying that can humans consciously decide that, look, work-life balance and everything else is all very well, but at the end of the day, if you got to build your career, your company, your country, your society, I think that needs a lot more hard work and harnessing the power of AI. So is there a golden mean possible between how much you relax and how much you work to make your country most successful in AI?
I think in general, what I'm saying is that the number of hours that you'll work a week is not going to go up, it's going to go down. If you see over the last 100 years, it was 200 years ago, 1815, I think, the first time when a Scottish reformer, I forget his name, he actually proposed the idea of 8 hours of work, 8 hours of rest, recreation, and 8 hours of rest. So that's how he divided 24 hours. There was no such scientific consensus on that before that. But it took 100 years after that, and I'm told Tata's did it in early 1910s and Ford did in 1915 when they introduced the idea of an 8-hour day and a 40-hour week. Not a 40-hour week, but 8-hour day for sure. And that people expected that productivity will go down dramatically and Ford will fail as a company because of this, became so people-friendly. But it turned out that it dramatically increased productivity. So that was 40 hours a week. And if you see the last 70 years, the number of hours per week has come down from roughly 40-something to 35 or 34, 33 hours per week across the globe. So with AI progress, we will not need 40 hours a week for everyone in the world for India to make progress or the world to make progress. So there's no reason, there is no sanctity to the 40-hour week. What I believe is that there will be some people who will have to work, who will work 70 hours a week or 100 hours a week. If you want to be an Olympic gold medalist in any sport of any kind, you'll have to work something like that. If you want to be
including AI,
or if you want to be, have the wealth of Elon Musk, you need to work very hard too. So it's not that hard work goes away, and there will be some people, but for by and large, for the world, I think the number of hours per week will come down to something close to 30 hours a week. In my opinion, 20 to 30 hours a week. And we'll be fine because there will be other things and we should not have to worry about money. And all the basic security, safety needs of the Maslowian hierarchy will be satisfied just by the way the government and the social fabric is set up. And we will do it because we have higher order needs. And that's the place where I believe we will go. There's no dearth of imagination. It's not that AI will replace all the jobs and we don't have to do anything because human beings are pretty creative. We'll come up with very cool stuff to do and we will work pretty hard. But not everyone will have to work 40 hours a week. That's what I think.
Great. Last question to Srikant, and again, let me preface it with an example. I don't know how many of you have seen a movie called The Artifice Girl. Ever heard of it? If you don't, Google it and you'll find it. It's one of the most amazing AI robotics movies I have ever seen. And I just happened to see it on a Singapore Airlines flight from Singapore to Mumbai about 6 months back. It is about this AI encased in a robotic form. It's a very pretty young woman, which is the AI. And she is unleashed on the internet to help the police of a certain country to find people who are engaging in internet pornography and etc., and does a fabulous job and becomes the person worshipped by the entire cops, because she can predict any predator, online predator, almost before it happens. So it's amazing. But the interesting part is that around 1 hour into the movie, the robot starts to realize that, look, she is so much smarter than the cops and so much smarter than the predators, that she gets this excessive opinion of herself, okay? And at the end of it, she says she feels very lonely, because if you think you're God's gift to mankind, and she is, then obviously she says, who's my peer group? So the movie ends with an amazing picture of this young robot just flipping through the internet and finding out this ballet class that's going on. And the last scene of the movie is the robot teaching herself ballet from the internet. What do I mean by this? I don't know. But will artificial intelligence also get lonely, Srikant?
It's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. My own sense is that there will be multiple competing AIs. There's one vision that there's one AI and it'll solve everything. But the way it is progressing today is that there will be highly competent AIs specialized in various kinds of tasks from various kinds of firms, which will all be competing. And as far as loneliness is concerned, I don't think they're conscious yet. I don't think AIs are conscious. We don't even know the definition of, an exact definition of consciousness. So I think they'll be fine for now.
And hopefully we'll be fine for now as well. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And I think we have a break now, so if you have any questions to Srikant, ask him during the break. Thank you.